Well, hey, Kat, how are you? We're back for another episode. What's going on?
I'm great. Not much. Had a birthday this week. I didn't know if I was gonna make it. I was really sick last weekend.
Okay, well, we want to be making it to our birthdays.
To make it through the birthday, right? And we did. We were good.
Yes.
So yeah, it was just such a weird like 24-hour thing. It was like a 24-hour bug and it went away and everything was, fine. And then I had my birthday and I was actually working on my birthday. So that was a fun experience, but I will admit that I worked on my birthday because of who was asking me to work with them. It's one of my favorite clients, and she
Oh,
totally spoiled me that day. I just had a feeling she might, break out in song and a birthday cake, and she did. She did not disappoint.
well, happy belated. Do you want me to sing you a song?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Happy birthday to you.
I love it. So good.
Oh my gosh. When I was in high school, we had this wacky choir director who taught me the most depressing happy birthday song. And I sing it to my kids every year because it cracks them up. And I
Hilarious.
can't, right. So it's like, I'm going to do it anyway. All right.
I can't
Me,
imagine. I'd love to hear
me,
it.
me, 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 me. Okay. Let me see. Okay. It goes. Happy birthday. Ooh. Happy birthday. Ooh. Birds are falling from the air. There's people dying
Oh my
everywhere.
gosh.
But happy birthday.
Why would they teach you this?
I'm so glad he did. So that's how I torture my kids every single year. But then I ended up with like, happy birthday, happy
Right,
birthday, and something
right.
jolly and silly. But
That's
I love the, but
wild.
happy birthday. Anyway,
Ugh.
well, I recently had my birthday too, and I also worked on my birthday, but my work was staining a deck. So that was cool.
Ah,
Nice manual labor.
yeah.
You discover muscles you didn't know you had when you have to stain a deck, I guess.
I
I,
don't
I
think I would
didn't know
ever
that would
line up to
happen.
volunteer to stay in a deck, so I don't know. I'm gonna trust you on that one.
Well, it
I'm
had to
like, do we know
happen.
somebody who knows and enjoys how to do this? Like,
Listen, by the end of the process, I was talking to my husband like, whatever we need to save for when it's time for this to be restained, I'd like to do that to hire somebody
yes,
because wow. No, it turned out just fine. Getting those like composite boards or whatever that are supposed to be good for, they're like plastic. They last forever, right? So you
yes,
don't
I
have to
know.
stain anything. Yeah, we don't have that kind of money. So staining it was. Anyway,
I'm glad you guys got through that, and happy
yes.
belated.
You. And I since we're in such a good mood and I'm singing us such uplifting songs, just kidding. This isn't a good segue. But I am gonna move us along because we have a really great guest today. And I've been so looking forward to having this conversation. He and I met online and I could tell, like, just as we started getting chatting, I was like, I really have to talk to this person because I know they've got some good stuff. And sure enough, we did talk. I think we even went over in our initial meeting just because it was such a great conversation. His name is Marcel De Jonghe, and he is the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for the largest local authority in Europe. And he brings such a unique perspective. Marcel has a mixed Zimbabwean and Belgian heritage, and like many of us, he's had his own journey finding where he fits, and now he's dedicated himself to helping others find that sense of belonging too. He lives in Birmingham, UK, with his fiance and their little girl, who carries on that mixed heritage mantle, blending Marcel's background with her mother's white British roots. And together, they're all about making sure that she grows up knowing and loving every part of who she is. Isn't that like the best? When I think about our kids and the parts that we play and helping them through their identity journeys. So, are you ready to meet him? Because he's really, really
Love
great.
it. Can't wait.
Awesome. Hey, Marcel, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I've been doing this for a while, talking to people, and everybody's story as a racially ambiguous, ethnically ambiguous, mixed race person is unique. I mean, there are certain threads that overlap, there are certain commonalities, but we each have a different story because there's no one way to be mixed race. And one of the things I introduced about you is that you have work in the space of DEI, as do I. And so that B at the end, that belonging piece is major to me. For me, I want to know that people feel like they are seen and like they have a sense of belonging. So I was wondering what inspired you to dedicate your work to fostering diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
I think it's probably the way I was raised. In my family, we've always been very open about mental health, about physical health, and my mum and both my father both had quite severe mental health problems. And I think the thing is, there's always been a stigma around mental health. So the only way I could help them was by being open, honest, and having those conversations and trying to support people, which then resonated into my career. And I started off my career in learning and development, which I primarily did that because I wanted to help people get a job, be better at what they could do. I loved the challenge. I loved it when someone came and just couldn't get what they were trying to learn to do their job. And I offer my time outside of work to say, right, okay, if you want to stay after work, I will make sure you will pass this and you will be in a position to be able to keep this role. But about a year before the murder of George Floyd, I started to do quite a lot of work in the government sector, primarily around how can people feel that they are included in every single thing which they touch.
Yeah.
So how are they reflected? Even small things like just the pictures on front of magazines, on front of prospectuses, that makes you identify with, well, am I capable? So I started to do things like, say, around age, around ethnicity, did things around culture as well, because there is a beautiful melting pot of culture in this world. The UK has a massive amount. Birmingham, where I live, is actually the first super diverse city in Europe, which means there are more non-white people in this city than there are in any other city. So we've peaked at just over 51%. And it is phenomenal. Every culture is here where you could possibly imagine. And you just think, I never had that when I was a child. I was very much in an area where it was predominantly white or Asian. There weren't a lot of black people. There weren't a lot of mixed heritage people. So I have this theory that if you pay things forwards, it will slowly but surely change things. If I have one conversation now today and I sit down with someone and explain to them how I feel, give them my perspective, give my lived experience, that might give them the opportunity to step up and challenge some behaviours they see in the future, which then just resonates down the line. And I think that's an opportunity I couldn't miss. So I'm now, I think it's about 6 years into my career in EDI, and I love it. I that intersectional perspective as well. I always say that we're more than just one aspect of our protected characteristics. So in the UK, that's what they're called. We have 9 protected characteristics. Mm-hmm. We intersect multiple places, and there's an opportunity to create a beautiful tapestry of people over in this country and across the world. But we concentrate so much on just one specific thing quite often. Actually, yes, we are so much more than just that.
Hear, hear, and amen, and all the things, standing ovation, because all of that I agree with. Or we call them protected classes here. It's things like gender, people over the age of 40, race, religion. And right now, there's a few more identities that need to be protected, including people who have transgender identities or who are married in same-sex marriages. So you're right, we come with all these intersectional identities. And so we should be thinking about that. Salience has actually been on my mind quite a bit, which of those stand out to us the most and during which times of our lives, in what contexts. And you were talking about your town or your experience growing up not being like what it is where you are now in Birmingham. And I was thinking about my childhood just yesterday growing up, where kids would be so mean to anybody who was othered. They looked a little bit different. if they sounded a little bit different, moved differently, whatever. And the younger generations today, I've got to say, like, are so inspiring as they see all of these intersectional identities and celebrate people. They have a great deal of patience and understanding. And I don't even like the word tolerance, because tolerance just sort of feels like, I'm putting up with it, right?
Yeah.
But they really like embrace people and are not afraid to call folks in or out or shut it down when people are mean to one another just for being who they are. So I think your story of not only wanting to help people through learning and development, but also help through this lens of the DEI or EDI or whichever acronym you want to use that means helping people feel included, is fantastic. Kat, what comes up for you?
It's just one of the things that I started to think of while you were talking, Marcel, is that in school, I would have people come up and ask me, like, well, what are you? Or what's, like, why do your eyes look like that? Or why do your lips look like that? And just like different, questions. And for some reason, like, it would always take me back. But I think that's probably where I got my, like, think quick on my feet kind of, like, person that I become is kind of like, oh, I could just like pivot and move to this point, or, or like, oh yeah, I'm this, and or that's from my mom, and so I don't think I really ever internalized a lot of it. Like, if somebody else was going through it, like, I would want to be like Mama Bear, or I'd want to fight and advocate for them so much more, I realized, than myself. And so it's interesting when you're talking about that, I was like, that is so interesting that I never really advocated for myself until I saw, other people feeling that way. And then I would be like, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. I just put that together. I don't know what that means. I don't know why it happened that way for me, but it does explain a lot in my life. So just thought that was interesting that came up for me.
Very similar. I think I've stepped in to arguments and other situations to defend others, but when it's come to myself, you become a bit of a wallflower. It's quite difficult, because I suppose there's this, internally how much pain you can hold and how much will break you, but you don't know what it is for others. What their stress bucket is, so to speak. Like some people, I know how much stress I can take as a person and how much insults I can take, or even just let it roll off me. But I have no idea what a breaking point is for someone else. Also, it's just the right thing. If I have the voice, if I have the ability to educate, I think that's the key. It's not about berating. It's not about belittling the other person. It's quite a large amount of the time, things that they say are from a lack of understanding.
Exactly.
Agreed.
So if I'm able to change that and give them a different perspective, or allow them to ask even questions, that changes a lot, I find, for a lot of people. I've been called some horrendous things by people who I've worked with, who are friends, and they think it's perfectly acceptable. I worked with someone for 8 years, and we were just talking. Ironically, this was someone who was in the office within HR, and they just turned around and went, "Oh, so you're a mongrel?" Thinking that is an acceptable
can't see
thing.
my face. I'm sorry. I just
Both of our eyes just shot wide open.
This person was an older female, and I won't use their name. But I just stopped and said, "So what?" And not one other person in that room blinked. Everyone else was white. I'm the only person of any other ethnicity. And I went, "Sorry, what?" And they went, "Oh, I'm only joking." Now, at that time, I didn't do anything because I know I could take that. I've had worse. But there is no positive connotation to be called a mongrel.
No. Also, that's your HR person, and I'm thinking that's who is setting the example and the guidelines for the rest of.
Luckily, they weren't HR, but they were in the office where HR are.
I see.
I was, but
so they're
still,
in that space.
You would have thought HR would have picked it up, right? They would have gone.
There's also that.
Yeah. Well, but it's there seems to be a filter for certain comments which are funny to an extent at the expense of other people. I'm not just talking about ethnicity. I'm talking about sexual orientation. I'm talking about age. I'm talking about, oh, I'm having a blonde moment. The amount of women who say that to themselves. I'm like, well, do you understand how you're just dragging down other women by saying you're having a blonde moment? Blonde women aren't stupid. There's no scientific data which proves this. Yeah, we use these statements and it's catching ourselves all the time. I think that's what we're going to do. We've got to police ourselves first before we can go out and police people.
I agree, but I also think the education is part of it, because I've been part of conversations where it's not even like the person is trying to be funny. It's just maybe something they've heard growing up around older family members or whatever that was acceptable to say at some time. Not because it was okay, but because it was socially acceptable to say. And they, I guess, didn't get that memo that it is not okay to say. This happened to me when I lived in the Czech Republic. I was working in an office and there was a colleague of mine. We always were in the office, but we needed to go out during this one day. And so we're all together. And for whatever reason, part of our group was somewhere else. So we're just sort of like standing around the parking lot. And this person walked behind me and he goes, "Oh my God." And straight up referred to that person. It's not someone we knew, but this person walking behind me as the N-word. And I had to stop because I was like, I don't know that I actually heard what I heard. And I kind of looked and then I was like, what did you say? And he just said it again. And I said, okay, we have to talk right now, like right now. And so this wasn't a let me wait until we get back to the office moment. And thankfully, this conversation went really well. He wasn't an American, didn't understand how awful that word was, but had only been taught that word to refer to Black people. So for all of his life until that moment,
passed down conversations, yeah.
That's how he referred. But part of it had to do with culture, language, different country, different language, and just not knowing that country is not very diverse anyway. So that's also part of why he pointed out the person. Like, why would you even point out the person? So there was that piece. So, I think sometimes as we're policing ourselves and we find ourselves in a situation where we might have to, I don't want to even use the word police, but we have to pause to make sure that we're not about to like jump all over a person who really just doesn't have the information. Like, I was flabbergasted because I'm like, how do you actually not? Like, but the way he was so horrified when I told him how this was, I knew he wasn't lying to me, that he really didn't know. And also when I said, what did you say? He said it again, like, not like, oh no. He was like, yeah, there's a, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, yeah, I'm having this conversation. So yeah, we all have some growing to do. And, at the same time, well, we know others do too. I believe extending some grace, at least getting the information before we start like flip it out like I really wanted to do inside, pausing. So anyway, Marcel, I wanted to, if it's okay, if you're comfortable with it, talk to you a little bit about your identity journey. Like, how has your perception of your identity changed over the years? You've kind of given sort of a workplace like setting of what you've experienced, but I'm wondering if there's like any particular moments that stand out to you or anything that has shaped your understanding of who you are.
Yeah. So I live in a city called Coventry, which is not too far from Birmingham. I lived in a poorly social economic area, so wasn't very wealthy. A mix of white and Asian, a lot of Black people. I was like, there was no Black children in my school year. I was like of mixed heritage. My mum, being a Black African woman, was an anomaly. And it was like weird to see, but you don't notice those kind of things. It's at a young age. You're in primary school, so about 7 or 8, and then into secondary school. And I would go from one side of the city to the other to go to secondary school. I was an okay student. So I managed to get into an okay school. What happened was, I again was like one of the only people who was of at least Black heritage in
even
my
in
year.
This other place,
Into
like
my secondary school, yeah. So I ended up being pulled out to go in for pictures for things like, oh, we need a prospectus, so do you want to be in a picture holding a book? Oh yeah.
What?
And you'd suddenly think, oh, and then one day it clicked that, hold up, I am
you are the representation of
I'm
yourself.
the diversity. Yeah. Oh, great.
Wow.
And no offense, like most people ask me, Kat, I get that a lot. Like, I don't understand that the question when people ask, what are you? Like you're an object. Like, what are you? Like, no, it's what is my identity? What is your heritage? People don't ask that. They still feel that what are you is an acceptable question. Because I've got freckles, I've got an afro, I'm quite light-skinned as a mixed heritage person, but I do tan easily. I just don't like the sun, and also I live in England. If you know anything of here, we perpetually rains here. So if you get the sun, it's you're lucky. But then it was one time on holiday. We were in Greece, and my mum and my dad,
lots of sun
my stepdad. Yeah, there's loads of sun. Beautiful place. My stepdad is a white guy. My mum, black woman. And we were by a pool and we're swimming around. And I started hearing some racist comments from this girl. And I didn't realise they were talking about me, my sister, my mum and my dad. Now, my dad, who is a white guy, loves the sun. He's tanned. So probably looks more Dutch or German than anything else. So she thought we weren't English speakers.
She felt free to say whatever she wanted to say.
Exactly that. And I just remember, and I was in the swimming pool and I've done a few laps and I can feel myself getting very hot in this water. So I just turn around to her, swim up to her and say, by the way, I understood everything you have just said. And this girl got up out of the pool. When I spoke to her parents, they all left and I never saw them again the holiday. So I don't know what they did, but it was the first time I ever stood up for myself. First time I stood up for my ethnicity. But then I started to notice from that point onwards a large amount of discrepancies in the way my mum was treated compared to my dad. My mum from Zimbabwe, also known as South Rhodesia at the time, when she lived there, was a Commonwealth country. She speaks the Queen's English. If you heard my mum over the phone, you would probably imagine a very well-to-do white woman. You then meet my mum and she's a 4'10" black woman who is like this little thing. It's like, hiya. And you see genuinely the confusion in people's faces because they spoke to my mum on the phone.
They have some expectation.
Yes, my mum's name's Eve. So it's Eve De Jonghe. And you're not, there's not an African name. So there's this African woman in front of you. And then once we started to have those conversations, my mum just opened up about all the things, like bizarre things she's been asked whilst over at the UK when she moved over here. When she started to work at a bank, someone asked her, is it different? Is it odd getting used to sleeping in a bed? My mum's like, well, what do you mean? And the woman's like, well, don't you guys like sleep in trees and stuff? My mum's like, what?
God.
No. Well, this is
for real. This is what was asked.
This is, this was the early 80s. And you just think, that's the key. That's where I come back to it. Education. We know so little about other places. We know so little about the world outside of our comfort zone that we consume some really terrible media sometimes and think that that is what it is. And therefore, we pick up things like behaviors, like you said, that person in the Czech Republic, just purely thinking that they could say the N-word because that's all they knew. Once you've educated them and you've been able to explain why, and also I always think about how that makes you feel, or that might potentially make someone else feel. If they carry on, then it's shotgun time. It's like, I'm sorry, but you are now making a choice. That's a different
story, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Now it's a choice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So just hearing that story about your mom's experience and the questions asked, just for listeners who are thinking right now, like, well, what if I don't know? And I mean, okay, it's no longer the 80s, first of all. We have computers in our pockets. Most of us are able to access information to educate ourselves. But I was also thinking about, if you do have some curiosity, how could someone ask, right? Just like how the difference between what are you and what's your racial or ethnic background or your heritage is different. And even some people aren't comfortable with that. But if you're in a situation where you could at least ask that way, that's one thing. And maybe before you lead with your assumptions based on what you've guessed or what you've been told, rather than saying, is it difficult getting used to sleeping in a bed? You might ask a question like, so what's it like where you're from? And allow that person to share their story with you if they want to. The other caution I have, even with that question, is assuming that someone is from a place different than where you are, just because of the way that they look, because that happens a lot too, where people will be like, oh, where are you from? And you're like, I am from here, because they're expecting you to look different, maybe.
How do people think I can speak fluent French is shocking.
Because of your name, probably, huh?
Yeah, it's completely my name. Born, raised in the United Kingdom all my life, but my biological father it really insisted on making me sound like something out of a Poirot episode. I point out to my mum that she was really cruel to allow that to happen, because I have more letters in my name than the alphabet.
My gosh.
Yeah. So, but it's people make that assumption, and I've had it where I've had a recruiter. I think, Shawna, I was telling you that I had a recruiter who rang me once, got my number off my CV and was like talking to me. She's like, oh, let me find you on LinkedIn. You hear it, and she's like, no, I can't find you. All I can find is this guy with loads of freckles. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And she's like, oh. And I was like, what were you expecting?
Right.
And she's like, just this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy. And I'm like,
it's so funny because me and my husband were the shorter side. We are very similar, features, dark hair, dark eyes and stuff. And then people are like, we just figured you'd be like tall blonde, like Aragon. Like, you're just like these, I don't know, European tall blonde people. And I was like, really? That's what gave you my last name? You thought that? But yeah, I get that everybody thinks I have any kind of Spanish, outside of being Filipino, but outside of, that is like some Spanish background where I actually speak Spanish. I do not. Like, I literally am, white and Filipino. So, but I can't get past that because my actual married name is Aragon. So they're going to speak to me in that way, regardless. I feel like I just need to catch up on my Duolingo all the time.
There you go. There you go. So it's so funny. Mine has nothing to do with my name. It has everything to do with my ambiguous appearance. And it also, and you've heard me say this, I think, before, Kat, it depends on my hair. So I change my hairstyle a lot. If I'm wearing the long, straight hair, people think that I'm Hispanic. They speak to me in Spanish all the time. I have been practicing, so maybe I can't answer, but I'm always like, I am not Hispanic. I'm not Latina. Then it comes to this other assumption. I've lived in a lot of places, and people, even without knowing that, they just want to put me in whatever box because they can't figure it out. They can't figure out what I am. And that was my air quotes. And so they'll ask the "where are you from?" question. So where are you from? And then I answer, I'm from Alaska. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, which they're likely not expecting. Oh my gosh. Wow, you're from Anchorage? That's so nice. Wow. So are you Eskimo? And then you have to stop and explain why that is a problematic term, and also that there's a lot of different sort of indigenous people all around this world. And I'm actually not one of them. I just happen to be a person that grew up in that space. But again, kind of thinking about like the questions asked of your mom, Marcel, people have latched onto some image or some idea of what that must mean. And since they can't figure out my ethnicity, my background, then they just plug it in like, oh, okay, she said Alaska equals this, must be this. So yeah, the biases and assumptions, they're plentiful around here. I don't know. I was going to ask you, I wondered, because for some folks, especially having heard that you grew up in a place that was predominantly white and not particularly diverse, have you ever felt any pressure to conform to some sort of way of being or expectation that others might have of you?
Yeah. I think most of my life, you have to pick a side, or at least you don't have to, but there is the forced hand there by others. So my mum's side of the family, I've been referred to as not being black enough, which I've never understood that as a statement. You know, I don't act black.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, I don't quite get it. And then when you ask, it's like, oh, well, you just think you're better than me. Well, I don't think I'm better than you. I don't think I'm better than anyone, to be honest. I said, but what you are doing is by saying that you're thinking that there are certain ethnicities which are better than other ethnicities. There is,
Right.
we
Yeah,
need to
I never thought about that.
Batter you down. Like,
Actually, you just got me just now, because I've heard that a lot too in my life growing up. Like, oh, you think they're always trying to tell, well, not anymore, but when I was a kid, they were always trying to tell me who I thought I was and what I thought about other people. But I guess I hadn't considered that in assuming that I think that I'm better or that I'm whatever, fill in the blank, that they must be adopting that same sense of social hierarchy just by making the accusation. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I think it comes from the term race, doesn't it, really? Because a race, there is always a first, second, third, and so forth.
Wow.
I don't like the term race.
I know you're dropping these bombs here.
Sorry.
Like, whoa, hold on.
I just, I don't like the term.
That is a total new framework for me. I'm sorry. I never saw it like that. I always saw it like raza, like, okay, I'm just going to let you keep talking. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just blown away. I was just like, what?
Start taking notes here.
There's my learning and development hat coming back.
I
think for me, race is just a dangerous term. I don't like it. I've never have. Race, when we use it in any other way, there has to be someone who wins. There always has to be.
Damn.
And dominant winner in society is generally a white person. You find that white people in society, and it's not for wanting, it's just that the world has been built predominantly by white people, so therefore it is more orientated towards white people. It's just not intentional, but it is a product of the system which we've got.
It used to be intentional, though.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. So for me, I prefer the term heritage. Because I think we all have this heritage.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're a mix of everything. But my identity has always been difficult for me to grasp. As a child, I didn't have people who were like me, except for my sister. And unfortunately, me and my sister, there's no denying that we look alike. My sister still gets stopped now in the city. She still lives in Coventry, and people are like, I know you. She's like, no, you know my brother. You know my brother.
Wow.
Basically, if I pull my hair back, I usually have a fade
my
right there. I don't have this afro.
No, I need to see
If
your
I pull my
sister.
hair back, look, you can see my brother. His name's Marcel. I'm like, yes, I know your brother.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's no
That's
denying
funny.
the family connection there. But there is no one else who looks like me.
Yeah.
Or has the same mix of heritage as me. I don't know another white, Belgian, black Zimbabwean person other than my sister. So there's that lack of sense of community, which therefore impacts my belonging. And I didn't realise for a very long time that I didn't feel like I had a sense of belonging. I didn't understand it because I was letting go of certain bits and orientating towards certain aspects. Like, I was brought up on R&B music. That was because my mum. That was Motown, R&B. That was it. So when I went to school and stuff like that, and no one else listened to that music, I suddenly was out of the loop. And music, for me, it's an integral part of my life. So I remember going to secondary school, and there was this group called Oasis.
Oh, yes.
And it was the 90s. Yeah. This was the 90s, and I'm like, the hell is this?
Like,
These
what
people
is
sound like they've got absolutely no vocal talent. It's all over the place.
That's the Wonderwall people. Yeah, my Wonderwall.
Yeah,
it was like
and
intentionally flat. I choose to
Yes.
believe it was intentionally flat.
Yes.
I
And
choose
there
to
was
believe
this,
that.
There was this thing called Britpop, and it was Blur versus Oasis. I don't know if you know the two groups, but they were headbutting. And there's me going, what? I remember going to school, singing at primary school, and my mum probably getting a bit in trouble singing Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing, not understanding a single word of the song. But that's like Motown. I was brought up on Motown. That was like I love Marvin Gaye.
Just picturing like
A little
8-year-old
me.
Marcel. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
Let's make love tonight. Yeah, not understanding a single word of it. And I don't know if you remember the group K7. And they did a song called "Come Baby Come." Terrible song.
Come,
Child.
baby, come, come.
Yeah. I was in primary school, so about
I never
10.
thought about those words either.
Yeah. I was 10.
I gotta give me love because you gotta give me
You
some.
gotta give me some.
Kind of makes sense now. Oops.
Yeah. And I knew the whole song, and like no one else. And I was like trying to get my friends to join in my world. Then the amount of comments I used to get was like, and people think this is a positive again, but they think, well, you look white. You're one of us. Like, okay, so do you understand by doing that, you are removing part of who I am? And you're basically saying that I should forget about the other half of my identity, which is also my mum.
Yeah.
But then all my friends used to love coming around my house because of mum's cooking. My mum, everything has to have spice in, everything has to have some form of flavour. It's, even a roast chicken would burn you. She'd somehow put something in it. And it became that I was the person who had the in on black culture. But I didn't, because I'm also not black. I'm just someone who just happens to embrace certain parts of the culture which I like.
Yeah.
And it's not me trying to remove some of the identity sound. I don't like that part of my culture. I don't like certain aspects of it. But I've had jokes said to me by people in the last couple of years. Well, you're half black, so, you could probably run faster than that person. I'm like,
oh my,
what?
Yeah.
And years ago, I would have just rolled with that and joked along with it because it was easier to then have to acknowledge it and address it. But now I am more than happy to educate people about that. Friends who I've known for years and go, do you know how terrible that is? And they're like, what? But it's only a joke. I'm like, but it isn't. Because some part of me, is you're only saying that because of my ethnicity. No reason. So yeah, even now, I think I did a post on LinkedIn. I still sometimes struggle because I don't see people who look like me, especially in the world of work. And I find that actually mixed heritage is only blossoming so much in the UK, especially. Like we had, every 10 years, the UK has a census. So 2021 was the last census. 3% of the UK have stated that they are of some form of mixed heritage. But from the 2011 census to 2021, that's the largest group of people. They've increased by 25% of the UK, but it's still a small population. So we are becoming more prolific, but we are such a tapestry. We're like multiple shades.
That's right.
So it's like you said, there's never this part where I know someone I can go, yes, you're part of my identity as well. You felt the same struggle. I don't want to have people to have struggles, but there's strength in numbers. Yeah. And the numbers are a single digit when it comes to mixed heritage, I find.
So our census is also every 10 years. It's on the aughts. So we had from 2010 to 2020 in the U.S. a 276% jump from 9 million to 33.8 million people. Like it just... Now, part of it, to be fair, is that until the year 2000, we did not have a way to accurately capture who identified as mixed race because people had to choose. I mean, historically in the U.S. anyway, because of the slave trade and all of that history, we kind of subscribed to the one-drop rule, otherwise known as hypodescent, where in some states it was even if you were 1/32nd Black, right? That was all, that equaled 100% Black. So it wasn't until 2000 that people could say, I have mixed racial heritage and choose different. Like, I think it didn't even let you choose at that point. I think you checked 2 or more or something like that. Then in 2010, you could check 2 or more and write something in. And then in 2020, it's even opened up more. But when you, like you said, I don't see anybody like me. And not to mention that people can be mixed and still not be like you. So what does that mean when we're trying to do DEI work as practitioners, setting up employee resource groups and all those things where it's like, that's so nice, that's great. But where do you go if you fit everywhere or nowhere? How do you handle that? Do you feel like you've gotten any closer to a sense of belonging? Like, what would it take to feel a sense of belonging?
In this year alone, I've been told that I am not what I am by people. Being told that, oh, that person's white, reference to me, and not quite understanding actually I've mixed heritage, so therefore, am I the right person for a job? Or am I the right person to step into that arena? And then I've been questioned as well, how do I feel about doing this job since someone else who was doing it was of an ethnic minority? And I was like, sorry, what?
And
I went, you clearly don't understand. My skin is in this game as well. I said, I'm actually
literally
of mixed heritage.
Sorry.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. It's like, I'm mixed heritage. And they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah. I said, but that doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter. You're saying that one of the main things and skill sets you need to be able to do the job which I do is to be a minority. I said, do you not see how that is a problem on its own? I said, it should be that the person who's coming here is compassionate, capable, educated, is able to make the changes. And does that matter if I'm white, black, purple, orange, green, able-bodied, disabled? It doesn't matter. I said, but you are putting unnecessary barriers in place primarily because you thought I was white. And that is that is a barrier which is unnecessary, but we do it in society constantly. So my main aim is for belonging is that those lines blur. It's not binary anymore, because I think that was the problem. So often I'm either white or I'm either black, and they are a polar opposite when it comes to certain aspects of life. And I'm not there. I'm not either. And I don't want to turn around and say, I'm a black man, I'm a white man. I'm not, because that isn't my identity. I'm a mix of multiple other threads in my life. My ethnicity happens to be part of that, and the culture which I picked up from, say, my mum especially. But through my life, I am stealing and borrowing from everything I'm exposed to. Living in Birmingham the last 10 years, I have learned so much more about the Muslim culture because we have a large population of Muslims here, and it's fantastic. But that was because I've been able to ask questions, be sensitively curious by asking, okay, why is Ramadan so important to you? Why is Eid something which you do, and why is it that you only do it, let's say, whilst this after sunset and then sunrise? And I've been able to have these conversations with people, and we just don't do that. And I think there's this fear around mixed heritage people of saying, well, you're either this or you're that, and you're not allowed to traverse between the two. Problem is, I am mixed. It's right at it's the first word which you use when you talk to me, unless we go right back to the 80s, and it was half caste in the UK. Which
I talked to you about that? I told you, must have told you a story of, I do have a half caste story.
Half caste, yeah.
The cat is like, what are you talking about? I'll tell you.
There's a great poem, which is actually, I don't know if it still is, but it was taught in UK schools. And it was all about, actually, am I half the keys on the piano? And it is all about a gentleman who talks about actually using the term half caste is really derogative, because it means when you cast a pot to bake it, to make it set, so you're not quite cooked, you're not quite set as a person. So
Wow.
It's a really derogative term as well, but I used to use it as a kid all the time.
I thought it came from caste, like social caste. I didn't know that.
No,
Interesting.
it was, yeah, I used to do it all the time to myself. I'm
Say that,
outcast.
describe yourself that way.
Yeah, as a child, I didn't know any better because that was a term which was used. And then when someone, I think it was at school when we were doing the poem, explained why it was such a derogative term, it completely made me think, well, I'm never going to refer to myself like that again because I'm not half a person.
Right.
I'm a whole identifiable human being, and I'm fully aware I can pass as a white person. Yeah, especially in my career. I wear suits usually when I'm at work. But then when people see me in my casual wear, it is completely polar opposite to how I dress.
Wow. So truly the way you're dressed changes how people see you.
Yeah. And like the music I listen to. Like, oh, I never would have thought you would listen to that kind of music. I'm like, okay, so that tells me a little bit about what you think certain music is in regards to identity. Like, I know more white people who listen to hip hop than I do. But you'll find that there is this ambiguity now of there isn't so many things like, oh, well, only black people listen to R&B and hip hop and so forth.
Yeah.
I know so many white people who could school me on R&B and hip hop, and it's not something I go, well, you can't listen to that kind of music. Like I love all genres of music, but I am currently stuck on a guy called Ray LaMontagne, and he's an exceptionally white country kind of singer, and I know that some of my friends would be like, this is outside of your normal listening. Like, that's the whole point. The world is this amazing place.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the normalizing of things happening now. Like, I loved how you said, I'm sensitively curious. And I know you mentioned you saw that, Shawna. It's like your face light up when you said that too, because that's exactly how I feel when you asked a question earlier to Marcel of like, how do you, how does one ask about somebody's background or heritage or whatever? And that was what was going through my head. I was like, I just like share that I'm curious. I want to know more. It's not that I'm curious. I want to know more. Like, tell me about you. Like, it doesn't even have to be about your race or whatever. It's like, I'm just super interested and I guess sensitively curious about everyone because of everything you're talking about right now. It's like, we have these predetermined assumptions of like what somebody's going to listen to or whatever based off their what they look like. But now I guess having 3 older children, and like you said, the kids that right now are just so open and so accepting and so loving. And so, I live through their eyes now. Like, it has definitely shattered even things that I might have had, ideas about. And I'm like, oh, I know nothing. Like, teach me through your eyes. It's been great watching them as they grow older. And I do think that, thank goodness, future generations are going to be more curious, already more curious. But I do hope that becomes more of a normalized conversation going forward. Like, I do have hope, that we're going there. It takes a while. And I see a lot of things that speak opposite to that, but I do have hope, that we're going to eventually be in the right direction and being curious enough,
It's those strong, open questions. I think that's what you need. Just to, I think it's sometimes even saying, right, I want to make sure that you can bring your entire self. What tell me something which allows me to better understand who you are, your culture, what's important to you, so I can make sure that if I have the power and the facilities, I can make sure that that's something which happens for you. So that's why I think sensitively curious is important to understand. And sometimes saying that, like, I really do want to learn. So I apologize if I make some mistakes. But tell me what you think I need to know to make sure there is a space for you here.
I really love where you're taking us with the sensitively curious, but I've got to ask you this. On one hand, we want people to be informed. We want them to take the responsibility to learn and to educate themselves. But on the other, we say, don't put the burden on somebody else to teach you. I just wonder how you kind of reconcile that, how you negotiate that. And so how do you balance that?
So back in 2020, this was something which was bugging me. I was always finding that Black people, especially after the murder of George Floyd, were constantly being asked questions and to regurgitate some emotional pain. Now that's uncomfortable, continuously having to relive that, pull the scab off a time advert. But in a previous organisation, I proposed something which someone else thankfully already had put forward to the organisation, which I think it was like reverse mentoring. And it was specifically around, okay, how do we have those conversations in a sensitive way? Well, first things first is, if you want people from Black or Asian minority ethnic groups to talk about their experiences, there has to be quid pro quo, has to be a reciprocal relationship here. You know, what are they getting for it? And also, it's up to them how much they give. So we designed this program called Mutual Mentoring, which paired up a more senior white person with a more junior Black, Asian or minority ethnic colleague here. We used some science, psychometric testing, and we did some other things and statements and stuff, and we meticulously paired these people up. We took them through for a year, and in agreement they had with each other that, you know, that everything they said was going to be with them and them only, and if they wanted to share anything else has to be explicitly agreed by the other party as well. But it took them through programs of things which like privilege, microaggressions. It talked about things like we did talk about white privilege. We did talk about cultural identity and appreciation and appropriation. The aim was, the reason we got a more senior person was, you knew that Black, Asian or minority ethnic person doesn't generally have anybody to be able to tap into, because there aren't many of those people who look like them in the organisation. So that was the reciprocal part. They became partners over a 12-month period, and that produced phenomenal results. That produced people who had long-lasting relationships, who still speak to each other even if they've left the organisation, where they've been able to advocate for them. You know, most career development isn't just because you're the right person, it's because you know the right person. Someone can advocate for you. Someone can say, oh, by the way, have you met X, Y, or Z? Here they are, and the door's been left open because that person's been able to put their foot through it. And you find Black, Asian, minority ethnic people in the UK don't have those people because we're not represented in senior roles. And that accelerated so many people's careers as well. It's got to be quid pro quo. It's not me bleeding my heart and soul out because it's valuable for other people.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to ask you this last question before we close. I know that it's very important to you to instill certain things in your child. And I was wondering what values and insights you aim to pass on to your daughter about her mixed heritage, and how do you help her or plan to help her embrace the fullness of her identity?
So she loves books. She's 15 months old, and she wakes up and she stands up in a cot and she says, book. She's got a plethora of them, and I read to her all the time. But we've got books with multiple identities in. The children aren't all white. We've got a book which is specifically about Zimbabwe, which the heritage, and it's for children. Before she was even born, I bought a book called The A to Z of diversity, and it was one of the first books I ever got her before she even was born. But the world is one of the most complicated things you will ever have to traverse. So for me, I will try and instill in her as much as I can that even though you're one person in 8 billion, you will be like the butterfly effect. Your impact will be phenomenal wherever you go. And if it can also be absolutely damaging, like the wrong choice of word or picking on someone, bullying, saying something, you may not realize it, but that leaves a scar. I always say microaggressions are death by 1,000 cuts. It's not the first one. It's not the second. It's not the third. It's the one which was minuscule and it meant nothing to the person who said it or did it, that's the one which breaks you. So you don't know what other people are going through. So just be good. And I try to say this to everybody, and it's easier said than done. It takes tolerance. And sometimes I've caught myself where I've stepped or walked past someone and I can see that there's something wrong here. And you just turn around and go, okay, if I was in this situation, what would I want to do? What would I want to experience? And that's what I want to instill in her. All my friends say that my child is going to be one of the most wokest children there are going to be. She's going to be defending everybody and everything and anything. But I will always tell her, stand up for what you know is right. You have to, because no one else will.
Oh, this time went so fast. I could talk to you all the time. This was so great. Kat, do you have anything just before we end?
Just a thank you. Like, this was great. I even in the last week, I don't even know how many times I said death by 1,000 paper cuts. So it's like you have those moments, and then every little thing seems like a paper cut to anybody else, but it's because you had that first moment that everything else starts just to get, heavier and hurt more. So I completely understand that, and I like to point it out whenever I can, and I just have those conversations with people that might not be knowing that they're doing that, and might not be knowing that they are creating so many more of those cuts and everything, until you just have that understanding, and then it stops, and then all of a sudden those other cuts start to heal. Thank you so much for your time too. I love being a part of this. I get to meet so great, incredible people, so I just appreciate it.
Do you want folks to be able to reach out to you anyway?
You can either follow me on LinkedIn. I'm not a prolific poster, but I do try, and when I do post, I do like to try and give an insight into different perspectives and try and make people question maybe their previous ways of seeing the world. The first thing is, go out there, be sensitively curious, genuinely go out. If you wanted to know a question, do your research on the internet, but go and ask that person, how can I make you feel that sense of belonging? Just go and Google why belonging is so important to the human.
Yeah, there's that.
Why we need it. There is physical and mental benefits for it. So have that uncomfortable conversation, but be sensitive. Understand that actually this is person's background, and it is a makeup of who they are. Yeah.
All right.
Thank
All right,
you.
y'all. Well, take care. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.